Hi everyone, Justine Leslie here, and I do a few things, and basically I help newly awakened empaths navigate their spiritual awakening, empower their intuitive gifts, get into alignment and flow, connect more to their soul, and cultivate a relationship to universe. I know it's long, but I do a few different things. So today I wanted to talk about kind of a taboo subject, but I've actually gotten this question a lot. And basically, it's about your sexuality during your spiritual awakening. So most people ask me, by the way, I have notes here, so if you see me looking off, that's why. I just want to make sure I get all the information to you guys. I have so many thoughts around this. So let's jump right into it. You know, I get right to the point. I'm a New Yorker. Okay, so I have so many questions about why the libido or your sex drive really becomes less during your spiritual awakening period. And it's a question, like I said, that I get a lot, and people are actually afraid to ask because it is kind of like a taboo subject, or they don't even ask because it's not even really on their mind, which we'll get into. But let me jump into why, and I want to start with ego. And why I want to start with ego is because a spiritual awakening is essentially what we would call like an ego death, right? So there's different stages of ego awareness, and the awakening stage of ego awareness is the third one. So first we have awareness of consciousness. So we become aware that we have different levels of consciousness. And this is that we're aware that, okay, other people think differently, other people have different perspectives from us, etc. The second one from that is the lack of ego awareness. So we're actually not quite sure yet that we have an ego, but we're right there. So we're not sure yet that we have an ego, and then we have a soul, right? And then when it comes to ego awareness, this is the stage of awakening. We begin to understand that we are not who we actually think that we are. This is why a lot of people have a lot of trouble with awakening. There's a plethora of different issues with spiritual awakenings, and there's a plethora of obstacles that you go through with the spiritual awakening. I can attest to that, but this is really about really understanding that you're not who you think that you actually are, and there's two parts of you. So it's the ego and the soul, right? So let's jump into that now. So we understand that we get to a level of ego death, and here we are, right? So now we realize that the ego is not who we are. It's part of our human construct, and we're actually given it as a tool to survive here on planet Earth, from the universe, God, source energy, however you want to explain it, okay? So it's actually not who you are, it's actually a tool given to you, right? So who's the you, right? So then we have to start looking at the you, and that's basically soul or higher self, right? I use them interchangeably. A lot of people don't, I do, so I believe the soul is basically the higher self, okay? So with that being said, we're realizing that there's two of us, and we get more connected to the soul because we've been so disconnected to the soul and our higher self. This is actually one of the reasons why most people have an awakening, is because they're waking up to what's true and unlearning all of the things that they were taught by society or parents, life in general. And again, one of those things, a big part of it, is that they're taught to be who the world told them to be, right? So again, we're not connected to who we truly are, which is the soul, okay? So with that being said, if you look at it like this means that the spiritual awakening is basically emphasizing all on the soul and none of the ego, right? The ego has been killed off. Most people, I would actually say during my spiritual awakening, I would say about 98% of my ego was killed off. It's really hard to explain the experience. Everybody has a different experience, but most people would say it's like getting your ego taken away from you. It's like your personality is taken away from you, which can be very dangerous, guys. This is another reason why spiritual awakenings are so massive, and they're so turbulent, and they really turn your life upside down, because we're actually not intended to be without ego here, okay? it is something that we need. That's why we're given it as a gift. It's basically a gift. A lot of people say the ego is the enemy. It's not. The overextension of the ego isn't the enemy. But we really need this tool to survive here as human beings. It's part of the human experience. It's part of being a human, being in a mitsu, and it's a human construct that we need, right? So it could be very dangerous, and it's temporary, right? So this ego death is definitely 100% temporary. Some people will say it was taken away completely. I want to say about 98%. I'm pretty up there, but it was really, really tough to kind of operate from a soul level, which I've never really operated from. I was always operating from ego, which was the false self, right? Okay, so with that being said, guys, hopefully we're following. Hopefully we're following. But basically, when we're into our spiritual awakening, we're really concentrating on the soul self and the higher self. So what does this mean? This means that we're actually, if we go into our metaphysical body, so most people that watch me are familiar with the chakra system. We have 7 main chakras. We have the crown, we have the third eye, we have the throat, we have the heart, and I know you guys can't see it, but then we have the solar, and then we have the sacral, and then we have the root, okay, at the bottom. Those are the 7 main ones. So it's actually pretty aligned, I'd like to say, that you can only see the top here because these are the ones that we're talking about here. So the first 4, the crown, the third eye, the throat, and the heart, they're all linked to more of a spiritual or soulful chakra. An energy point, essentially, right? So what that means is that during our spiritual awakening, all of this is activated up here, okay? So that means crown. Crown means connection to source, something bigger than yourself. So many people have come to me and they said, Justine, during my spiritual awakening, I could feel tingling on my head when I meditate throughout the day. Basically, your crown chakra is opening up, right? And that's the connection to source, okay? So it's almost like they shoot down from the bottom and all the way through the top, and you're very, very open on the top here, right? Because you're very connected to source during your spiritual awakening, okay? Then the third eye, which is our intuitive gifts, open up, right? So third eye is clear seeing. Seeing, feeling, hearing, all of the clairs gifts that you have, they come through here. Throat, speaking our truth, right? We're unlearning, we're figuring out who we really are, and we're finally speaking our truth. And then heart. I know during my spiritual awakening, I did a lot of forgiveness work, a lot of healing work. So it's all having to do with the top 4 chakras. So what does this mean? This means the bottom 3, the solar, sacral, and root chakra, they're all linked to more of the human experience. So let's look at that. The root chakra is financials, money, stability, so shelter, and all of those things that we need as humans. The second one is sacral, which is creativity and sexuality. Do you see where I'm going with this? I promise it's all connected. And then the solar is more confidence and feeling alive and doing things that you're passionate about, and that life force energy, right? So those bottom 3 are more of the human construct, and they are more dealing with the human experience, okay? So as you can see, I already mentioned sexuality, and that lies in the sacral chakra. So that is below. So when we're going through a spiritual awakening, we're working on the top 4 chakras, we're working on this energy, we're working on a soul level, we're not working on a human level, okay? So guess what? Even though I'd like to think, and I truly believe that sexuality can be a very spiritual experience, it could also be a traumatic experience. It could, all types of feelings are connected to it, right? All types of spirituality is connected to it. It is still an act that happens through the human construct, right? You need a body to have sex, right? So basically it's about, it's a corny phrase, but pleasures of the flesh, right? And you have to have flesh to be able to experience this pleasure, right? So with that being said, why our libidos are low during our spiritual awakening is because we're not focused on that. All of our energy is pushed up here. Connection, speaking our truth, forgiveness. We do so much healing work during our spiritual awakening. We're not thinking about our sexuality in any way, okay? So that's actually why we are not necessarily have a high sex drive, or at least what it was before the awakening, and then we don't have a high libido. However, I want to put this disclaimer in here as well. Some people that have spiritual awakenings also have Kundalini experiences. Now, with that being said, all awakenings are different, okay? Like I said in the very beginning, a lot of people do describe it as an unlearning, and they do describe it as an ego death, okay? So I see those two common denominators. But people can have, everybody's different, and everybody's, don't forget, guys, spirituality is about experience, okay? So everybody's experience is completely different. And when you have a Kundalini experience, basically that's the releasing of energy from the bottom of the root chakra all the way up to your spine. And it's releasing trapped emotions, essentially, okay? With that being said, a lot of people do report that they are extra sexual because it happens down below. That's where the energy coil is. So basically, Kundalini comes from, it's called a snake. So they believe that, I believe it originated in Hinduism, either Hinduism or Buddhism. Don't quote me on that, but it's the coil at the bottom of the spine that sits there and basically gets activated. People actually purposefully, intentionally try to activate it. Mine was due to trauma in my spiritual awakening. That's what happened. But it gets activated and it kind of shoots up, and it's very emotionally intense. So if you've had a more emotionally intense spiritual awakening, it probably had to do with the Kundalini. However, some people, like I said, report that they become very sexual with the Kundalini. I had one personally. I did not. I was still low libido, and sex was the last thing on my mind, right? So with that being said, everybody's experience is different, but for the most part, I spent 5-6 years now, it's 2021, I believe, really interviewing people that have had spiritual awakenings, connecting with people that had spiritual awakenings, and more often than not, they are losing their libido and their sense of sexuality as they go through their spiritual awakening. But again, to answer that question, it's really because we are focusing on a soul level. We are not focusing on our human bodies. Most people too also, and I fall in this category, claim that they do not feel human during their spiritual awakening, which I don't. My head was in the clouds most of the time. I was not in a place of embodiment, which, by the way, the last stage of the ego awareness is ego integration, meaning that integrating both ego and higher self as a whole of who we are, because we have to have both. That's the final lesson there with ego awareness, is that, yes, the higher self, aka soul, and the ego must exist at the same time while you're here on this planet, okay? While you're in a body, which if you're watching this, I'm sure you are. So hopefully that makes sense, guys. It's not, again, and let me just put this disclaimer as well, it's not a positive thing if you are experiencing low libido, and it's not a negative thing if you're not or you are. There's no right or wrong here. It's, again, individual to each person's experience, but this could explain why you completely drop off, especially if you've been a very sexual person before that. It does come back. I'll tell you that, guys. It comes back with the ego integration, but you have to go through your spiritual awakening and ride with the waves, and ride with your experience and really move into what feels good. Take care of yourself during a spiritual awakening, and I hope this was helpful for you guys. Okay? Thanks so much, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.